All right, good evening, everybody. I'm ready for bed. I like to read before bed, so tonight I'm going to read to you. And I'm reading Spooky in Virginia. It's just called Spooky Virginia. It's tales of haunting, strange happenings, and other local lore. And because I'm a Virginian, I'm local lore. These stories are retold by S.E. I'm going to tear this shit up. Uh, Schlosser? Go ahead. I'm going to let y'all get on that. Try and correct me if you feel a need to. Illustrated by Paul G. Hoffman. Haha. I was reading that backwards. Anyways, so I just got this book today from Barnes and Noble. Super cute book. Um, Super cute illustrations. It has this cute little map of Virginia. Correct. We're the one that looks like that. Story number 1 is called Goggle-Eyed Jim, which I'll be reading to you tonight. And it takes place in the Great Dismal Swamp, which is right down here in southeastern Virginia. Boop. So that's fun. Excuse me. So, story number 1, Goggle-Eyed Jim, and away we go. He was in a... Damn, we're already fucking up. Okay. Sorry. Don't cuss. He was a notorious scoundrel and a horse thief, and he was the bane of my existence. Goggle-eyed Jim, they called him. The things they called me when I failed to catch him? Well, that's besides the point. Being the only lawman in the backcountry area close to the Great Dismal Swamp ain't easy. Too many of my suspects lost themselves in the trees and the undergrowth of the swamp, leaving me behind in the mud up to my armpits, with more often than not a lump on my head where I hit it on a low-hanging branch. It was infuriating. But Goggle-eyed Jim was the worst. Week after week, angry citizens would storm into my office demanding justice. Their reports were always the same. They'd been awakened by the clanging of cowbells and a huge hullabaloo out in the barn. By the time they grabbed a rifle and ran outside, a dark-cloaked figure with a huge goggles that reflected oddly in the moonlight would flash by the back of the citizens. Flash by on the back of the citizen's best horse, laughing as he went. Goggle-eyed Jim had a hee-haw of a laugh, like a brand donkey, but he was no laughing matter. When the mayor brought home a real beaut of a stallion that October, I set up a trap for Goggle-eyed Jim. I arranged with the mayor to sleep in his barn in the hayloft overlooking the horse's stall every night for a week. We were both sure that Goggle-eyed Jim would come for the horse as soon as he heard about it, and the mayor made sure to parade his new purchase up and down the streets of our little town, boasting all the while of his prowess as a racehorse, his beauty, and his price. Sure enough, 3 days later, I was awakened from a strangely deep sleep by the clanging of a cowbell. I cursed and rolled over in my prickly bed of hay, throwing off my old horse blanket and reaching for my rifle. The blanket sent up a huge cloud of dust, and I sneezed as I snatched up the gun and scrambled on hands and knees to the edge of the loft. How had Goggle-eyed Jim gotten into the barn without me hearing him? I am the lightest of sleepers, but not even the soft wicker of a horse had disturbed my slumber, though I had been awakened by much smaller sounds on previous evenings. As I reached the edge of the loft, I saw a horse's tail swishing through the open barn door. By now, the other horses were neighing and whinnying to beat the band. Many of them reared when I made a foolish leap directly down to the floor from my perch. Still clutching my rifle, I could have busted a leg, but somehow made it with only a painful twist to my ankle. I rushed outside and stopped right beside the barn door to take aim at the fleeting rider with his flapping black cloak and reflecting goggled eyes. The mayor came rushing out of the house as I took my first shot, and he got off a second shot as I reloaded and aimed again. Oh, we get an illustration. Boom. Creepy. I would not be happy to see this guy at all. Okay. I was sure to hit the scallywag with my first shot, and I knew I nailed him with the second. But he kept on riding down the lane and out of sight, and the air was filled with hee-haw of his laughter as he got away again. The mayor was not pleased. Folks started talking about running me out of town or hauling out the tar and feathers. I was about ready to resign when I got a real lead at an elusive horse thief. A fella who lived deep in the Great Dismal Swamp saw Goggle-Eyed Jim hanging out at a rickety old cabin near Lake Drummond that was once used as a hideout by pirates. As soon as he described the place, I knew exactly where he meant. I loaded up my gun and headed into the swamp in the golden afternoon light. It took a couple of hours to locate the old cabin and another couple minutes to find myself a hiding place. Darkness fell quickly and no Goggle-Eyed Jim. I made myself comfortable. I didn't care how long I didn't care how long I had to wait. I'd wait until kingdom come if I had to. The darned horse thief was going to jail, and I was the one who's going to put him there. Well, I thought I'd kept eyes and ears open, but I must have dozed off because suddenly there was a light shining in the upstairs window, and I could hear voices coming from the cabin. One of them was a woman's voice, and she was giggling and cooing like a dove. Seemed like I caught Goggle-Eyed Jim in a tryst. Too bad for him. I hauled out the old ladder. I spotted it in the lean-to on the side of the cabin, and I put it against the wall. Cradling my pistol, I climbed up the ladder and peered into the window. Yep, there he was, Goggle-Eyed Jim. He was swathed in his long black cloak, still wearing his green goggles. They seemed to glow in the lantern light. Made my skin crawl. I'd be glad to see the creepy fellow behind bars. At that moment, a lady wearing not much to speak of flounced into the room with a bottle of brandy and a couple of tin cups. She cozied up to Goggle-Eyed Jim, cooing something flirtatious in his ear. "Righto, your time is up, old chap," I muttered, pulling out my pistol. The bounty on Goggle-Eyed Jim said dead or alive, and I didn't much care which it was at this moment. He'd made my life too miserable for too long for me to feel any compassion for him. As if he sensed my thoughts, Goggle-Eyed Jim turned around, his face towards the window where I crouched atop the ladder. His eyes behind the goggles seemed to glow with a greenish blue light. His face was so gray and withered, he looked like a corpse. He grinned suddenly, showing mouth with more gap than yellow teeth. I aimed and fired. I hit him too. The woman shrieked and fled, and Goggle-Eyed Jim clamped a hand over his chest and staggered dramatically far from the window. By the time I clambered inside the cabin, he was poised to the window ledge and gave me a jaunty wave, then tumbled out the window, still dramatically clutching his chest. I tore down the stairs, rushing past the floozy and out into the tall grass of the yard. A figure in the dark cloak lay in grass, his green goggles glowing in the moonlight. "I gotcha!" I shouted, racing towards him, and then I stopped abruptly with a gasp of fear. The prone figure before me began floating upwards from his grassy bed, his arms still outstretched. Goggle-Eyed Jim was glowing from within. And I realized with ice-cold shudder I could see the weedy lawn through his body. He was a ghost. By the time Goggle-Eyed Jim was floating about 6 feet in the air, his body still sprawled flat on nothing, suddenly he sat bolt upright and snorted, "Hee-haw, hee-haw!" I staggered backwards with a gasp of disbelief at the ghostly figure starting to spin around and around faster and faster, still snorting with laughter. A dark hole appeared behind the glowing figure with his piercing green goggles, which were the only part of the spirit I could make out in this furious body blurring twirl. Suddenly, the spinning figure fell backwards into the dark hole, which shut with a loud snap. The empty yard was filled with the smell of sulfur. I let out a shriek of pure gut-wrenching terror, and I went crashing away into the woods. Behind me, the floozy let out an equally loud shriek and went crashing off in the other direction. I'd run only about 100 steps before I broke through tangled of brushes into the hidden meadow and was nearly trampled by the mare stallion, which had been happily grazing in the moonlight until I came crashing along. The stallion wasn't the only horse in the meadow. There were at least 6 more horses, all of them reported stolen by Goggle-Eyed Jim. I I stared at the horses and wondered just how long had Goggle-Eyed Jim been a ghost. Casting my mind back over the reported thefts and matching them up to the horses before me, I reckoned that the horse thief had been dead at least 6 months. Not that this small detail had fazed Goggle-Eyed Jim. He just kept right on stealing horses, though he had no need to sell them now. No wonder bullets didn't affect him. I knew both my shots had landed that night at the mayor's house. Standing there in the moonlit meadow, my skin still crawling from the encounter with the ghost, I wondered how I was going to explain the situation to the mayor. Then I shrugged, mounted the stallion bareback, and rode home. I'll return the other horses in the morning. The mayor was mighty glad to get his horse back, though he wasn't terribly convinced to my story about the ghostly Goggle-Eyed Jim. Still, once he'd seen all them horses grazing in the hidden meadow, he decided at least part of my story must be true. Anyhow, he okayed my plan to have a priest out to the old cabin to do an exorcism. And that did the trick. Goggle-Eyed Jim's days of horse thieving were over, and I got to keep my job. So one of us had a happy ending. I'm glad it was me. That was cute. Weird, but cute. So next time we will be doing The Convert over in Coburn, Virginia, which I'm not too sure, but I'm not going to cheat and look at the map. I'm going to guess. I think it's over by West Virginia. We'll see next time. Thank you guys for joining me, and sleep tight.